latest episode of the State Library's Our Online Collections webinar series. Today, we're going to be looking at databases. What are they? How can you go about finding them? And how do you use them? My name is Marcus. I'm the Digital Access and Family History Manager at the State Library, and I'm joined today by three of my fellow librarians, Caitlin, Rebecca, and Tom. Now, if you're watching this video live, it's an interactive webinar, so we encourage you to post any of your comments or ask us any questions throughout the session. If you're watching this on the State Library's What's On page, you'll see in the text below the video, there's a link to the Slido forum. If you click that link, which I'm showing just here, that will take you straight into the forum where you can post your comments and ask any questions. Or you can navigate to slido.com and then enter the event code Our Online Collections as a single word with no spaces. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over to Rebecca, who will give us an introduction into what we mean about databases.
Thanks very much, Marcus. Well, yes, as Marcus said, today we're talking about databases, or sometimes referred to as e-resources or part of our e-resources. But what are databases? Well, they can be described as discrete collections of digitized information, and they could be journals, scholarly or recreational, conference papers, maps, statistical collections, historic or current newspapers, pictures, even streamed music or video. Now, this is information that's not usually just freely available via Google. The library actually subscribes to these databases, pays for them, and then makes them available to anyone who comes into the library. And also, many of them are also available from home or anywhere else to anyone who is registered with us and has a Victorian address. And we'll get on to that in a moment. So usually the databases, but not always, focus on a particular subject or theme. So that could be medicine, business, art, law, history, and all sorts of other subjects. And also mostly they are, or at least the ones we're providing access to, are available in full text. So you can see the whole of the article rather than just seeing information about it. A few of them are what are called indexes, where you then have to go a step further. But as I said, most of them are available in full text, which is another bonus. Now, in terms of becoming a member, what you need to do then is click over here on our Become a Member link, and that will take you through to this screen here. And on this screen, you will see some information about becoming a member. You can click on this green button here and now put in your details here, and you will get your membership number extremely quickly, either via SMS or via your email. And then from there, you're able to go back to the homepage here and get onto the databases. There are a number of ways of getting into the databases, but one of those ways is by putting your mouse over search and discover here, then moving down to I'll just move this up here a moment. Moving down to where it says A to Z databases, clicking on that A to Z, and then you will be taken through to the database screen with lots of other information on it too. And this is where I'll be handing over to Caitlin to tell you more about that.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, Rebecca. Just going to bring this up. Okay, so here we are at the A to Z databases screen. So let's just have a quick look around the page and see what we've got here. So at the top, we have 4 filters to help you filter the databases and find the best one for your research. Underneath that, we have all of our databases in the collection listed alphabetically. So you can see we've got about 350 databases here. You can scroll through them at the bottom, or you can use the alphabet tiles here to jump to a letter. Off to the side, we have a tile here to become a library member. So as Rebecca just said, many of these databases you need to be a library member to use from home. So if you're not a library member and you've made it to this screen, you can just join here. Underneath, we have a tile for new and trial databases, and this is updated quite frequently depending on trial databases that we have. So you can see at the moment we have the Haynes manuals, which are car and motorcycle manuals. So if you're interested in that, have a look. We've got that on trial until the end of July. We'd love to hear your feedback about it. And then a little bit further down, we have a tile with some help. So if you're having trouble with your e-resources, you can browse a range of help topics, or you can ask a librarian. So that you can ask for help via email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So let's have a closer look at the filters to try to find the best database for what you're doing at any time. So this second filter, we have database types. So if we click on that, you can see we've got different kinds of databases. So we were talking already that we've got lots of databases that you can access from home with your state library membership. You can see here we also have some databases that are only accessible at the library, and that could be because of licensing restrictions, or also because they might be on physical CD-ROMs, which we need to load onto library computers for you. Further down here, you can see we also have some databases that are actually free websites that are available to everyone. So you don't need to be a library member to see these. And many of these will be available via a internet search. We've included them on this page because a lot of them are really useful resources for the research that you might be doing. Over here, you can also filter by e-publisher or provider. If you're not particularly familiar with databases, you might want to skip this step. But there are lots of reasons why it might be useful to you. For instance, Informit is a database that's very centred on Australian academic research. So if that's something that you're very interested in, you might want to stick to the Informit suite. And over here, you can also search for databases using a keyword. So for instance, I'm just going to try searching for maps and see what comes up. So down here, you can see we've got a range of different databases. So Mapping the World, Maps and Travel Literature. We've got Australian Maps on Trove, David Rumsey Map Collection. And down here, we've got Maps CD-ROMs, which is available at the library. So this is a good chance to show you about these icons that you'll see next to the databases. So if you hover over any of these, it'll bring up what it means. But basically, this little library icon means that it's only available at the library. And that is because it's a CD-ROM, which is that little disc. These ones here are free websites. And this here is access from home. So probably the most useful filter for finding relevant databases is to use the subject search. So if you go here, you can see we've got a lot of different subjects that we've already grouped our databases into. I'm going to select a popular one now, which is family history. And if you scroll down, you can see the recommended resources box. So these are resources that are very popular or are very useful to the chosen subject. So you can see we've got Ancestry, we've got some CD-ROMs available at the library, Family Search and Find My Past. And then underneath, there are some more resources which could also be very valuable depending on what kind of research you're doing. And back over to the side here, now that we've selected a subject, we also have a tile which shows links to family history guides. So those are research guides that are written by librarians at the State Library, and they're really great sources of knowledge, can help you to get your research started and point you towards lots of great resources. So that's really useful. At the moment as well, we have a subject here, which is coronavirus open access information. So we'll click on that. And you can see we have some databases here. These are all open access at the moment, which means, again, you don't need to be a library member to see these. Some of them are resources that you'd expect to find with coronavirus information, such as the Department of Health. and others such as Gale Health and Wellness or the Oxford Academic Journals are resources that would usually be only available to members, but at this point in time, the publishers have made them free for everyone. So check out that subject guide if you're interested. I'm just going to do one more search here just to show you how this all fits together and show you how to actually get into a database once you've found something. So let's say that I'm going to start writing a research paper, and maybe it's over a few different disciplines, or maybe I haven't quite narrowed it down to a specific discipline yet. So I'm going to have a look at some of our multi-subject databases. And over here, I've already performed quite a bit of research online. So I've already done some Google searches and some other search engine searches. So I don't want to see everything that's free, freely available, everything I've already seen on the web. I want to see what the State Library has to offer for me. And now I'm going to scroll down, and you can see we've got quite a few for our recommended resources. I'm just going to pick ProQuest as it's one of the largest multi-subject databases that we have on offer at the library. So now I've clicked on that, you can see it's taken me to the login as a library member page. So here I'd enter my barcode, which you'll get as soon as you register as a library member, enter my last name and accept the conditions of access. And then all I have to do is log in, and it will take me over to ProQuest. And Tom's going to have a quick look through and show us what you can see from there. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Caitlin. All right, so this is ProQuest. So ProQuest is one of the larger multi-subject databases the library subscribes to. There's actually a number of ProQuest databases that you'll be able to access through the A to Z list. But we thought we'd show you some of the functionality of ProQuest because it doesn't matter which of those databases you're looking at, all the kind of search options will be similar. And as you can see on the screen here, if you get to the home page of a ProQuest database, there's a big basic search bar, and then there's some other functionality up the top. So this is very similar to the other databases that you might come across that are accessible through the library. So I've got a few others here, such as Gale, and I think we'll go back to ProQuest, but you can see, yeah, basically you've got a basic search bar and then additional features up the top. With ProQuest, it's also helpful to note that this databases tab here will let you know how many databases you're searching across. So currently I'm in the general ProQuest database. So I'm searching across 21 databases in total. And you can click on that tab if you're wanting to choose between them. So let's do a simple search. So I'll do a search for pangolin. So just put that in the search bar and hit the search icon and you get the results. So you can see there's quite a large number of results here, more than 18,000, and that's because we're searching across all of ProQuest's databases. And then on the left-hand side here, there's a number of features that you can use for filtering your results, which are very helpful. And they're very similar to the other databases you might see, as well as the library catalog. So by default, the results in the middle here are sorted by relevance, but if you wanted to, you could change that to the most recent first, or also the oldest first, depending on what you're looking for. So if it's current scientific information, most recent first is helpful, or if you're looking for historic newspapers, then potentially the oldest first is helpful. The next two options down here, full text and peer reviewed. Rebecca already mentioned full text before, that's saying that most of our databases are full text, but there is some that will only display some information or an index entry about a particular item. And then you'll need to access that item by finding it in another database or elsewhere. But it's helpful to select this box if you're wanting to access the item through this database, because then it will only show you ones that you can access the full text for. The next option here, peer reviewed, is very common across academic and scientific databases. So peer reviewed refers to a process in a lot of academic publishing where before something is published, other people within the discipline will review it and ensure it's of a certain quality. So if you're wanting academic publications of a certain level, then you can click on peer reviewed. So it would exclude things like newspaper publications, trade journals or magazines, and just include those more academic items. One of the advantages of ProQuest compared to things like Google is even without clicking something like peer reviewed, you're still going to get a certain quality of items because they're all curated and selected for a specific subject or whatever that database is focused on. So that's good to keep in mind of the advantages of using these databases. So if we go down a little bit further, you can also limit it here by source type. So if I were to click on any of these sources, then all the results would be limited only to that particular source. But it's helpful to know if you click on the More button at the bottom here, we'll get another window and you'll be able to include or exclude any of the sources that you're interested in. So if I'm just interested in scholarly journals today, I can just click on that one and click Apply, and then my results will update shortly, and then just have academic or scholarly publications. So all of the other filters further down here function in a very similar way, being able to limit it to specific areas, and then they'll have the more include and exclude options. The publication date is a little bit different, but as you can see, you can click on one of these to limit it to a particular number of years. Or if I click on the custom date range, then I can enter the dates that I would like to limit the results to. So I can put in a full date, or I could just put in a year as well, which is sometimes just a bit easier. So let's just limit it to recent publications. So you can see there's a number of results here. So if we just click on one, we can see what it looks like. It'll bring up a bit more information. So if full text is available, it could be in a couple of formats. So this first one here is full text that you can view in your browser just as text. So if you scroll down, you'll be able to read this entire article, which is about the of cowboys, fish and pangolins, exotic leather trade, which is an interesting one. So if we click on the PDF tab, the second tab here, it'll show us a PDF version of that same article. So as it appeared in the publication that was published in. And the third tab is just information about that publication. If you're wanting to download a copy of the PDF, there's an icon just here. All you need to do is click on this item. And if it's available in full text, that should appear and you'll be able to download the item. There's also a few other options here. So you can cite the publication, or you can also email it to yourself or print it. So the email and print options vary depending on what item you're viewing. So just look at what options you're given when you click on that. Not always will it be sending you the full text. You might need to download it through this PDF download here. I'll show you the citation because it's very nifty if you're writing an academic essay, because it's got a whole list of citation styles that you can have the citation in. So depending on what's required for your particular research. So I'll just close that rather than wait for that to load, and we can head back to our results. So the other nifty thing about ProQuest databases is you're able to kind of select results as you go along. So using this checkbox here, if you find a few things of interest, rather than going into them individually, you can click on the checkboxes and select them. They'll then appear in this folder in the top right-hand corner, so you can easily keep track of them. And you can also perform some of the functions we were just talking about, the citation and the emailing on that group of selected items. So this group of items that we've saved are only going to stay there until you close the browser window. As soon as you close your browser window, those items will disappear. So just keep that in mind. But if I do another quick search here for something else, so search for bats. So when this loads, you'll see that the items here still remain. So the 3 items I saved are still there. And also all the filters that I'd applied previously have remained as well. It's just the search has changed to my new keyword. So you can easily clear all your filters by clicking on this button if you want to start afresh, or head back to the basic search as well. The other helpful tip to keep in mind was scroll down to the bottom of the page. There's the State Library logo down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And next to that is the Contact Us for Assistance. So if you're ever having technical issues with a database, or you need some help with your research, if you just click on this link here, it'll take you back to the library's Contact Us page. And there's a few options here of how you can get in touch. So Caitlin mentioned our Ask a Librarian service, which is the best one at the moment, because until we're open to the public, the in-person and phone isn't available, but you can always contact us through that service. But that's an overview of ProQuest, and that's just one of the many databases that are available. But I'll hand back to Marcus now and see if we have any questions about what we've been presenting on.
All right, thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Caitlin and Rebecca. Let me just go back to my screen there. So I'll just mention once again quickly that we are asking or expecting you to ask any questions that you have about using databases or how to go about accessing these resources online. So if you're watching on the What's On page on the State Library website, just click on that Slido forum link. That will take you straight through to the platform we're using for all of our comments and questions, and you can ask your questions of us there, or enter slido.com into your browser and use the event code Our Online Collections. Type that in as one single word with no spaces. And I did forget to mention before, but if you open up Slido in a new window, you can have that visible while you're still watching the video. Now, we have had a few questions come through. The first question, I think, is probably for you, Rebecca, and they've asked, can anyone become a library member?
Yes, certainly, and I probably don't need to share my screen to tell you that. Anyone can become a member. However, the only way that you can access the databases from home is if you happen to have a Victorian address. The advantage otherwise of becoming a member is for when you actually come into the physical library, you'll need to be a member to request our items that are held in storage. So if you're looking at this from overseas or interstate, well, particularly interstate, the best thing for you to do would be for you to register with your state library and become a member there to get digital access to some of the types of databases we're talking about. And in addition, anyone living in Australia, I'd highly recommend you register with the National Library as well, because then anyone with an Australian address can access their databases as well. Any more questions on this?
That segues beautifully into the next question, actually, which I was going to answer myself, which has been what would be the difference between the State Library's collection of databases and the National Library of Australia, for example. So this person has said, on the surface, it looks like both NLA and SLV have similar databases, but there are likely to be unique and specific ones. Yes, it's very true that there are some similarities between what the State Library holds and what the National Library holds in terms of the available research databases. The three major database publishers are ProQuest, EBSCO, and Gale. Within our collection of databases at the State Library, we have a significant number of ProQuest and Gale databases available, but the National Library has a lot of EBSCO databases. So I think actually they have quite a few ProQuest as well, so there is some crossover in ProQuest, but certainly we have a lot of Gale, which the National Library don't have, whereas they have a lot of EBSCO databases, which we don't have. The other thing to note about the National Library of Australia is they subscribe to a greater amount of content on Informat, which Caitlin mentioned earlier is the Australian specific research database. So whilst we have a lot of access through Informat, most of it is the index databases. So the full content isn't necessarily always available through us. But as Rebecca's just said, anyone who lives in Australia can become a member of the National Library of Australia, access their databases, and then you'll get full access to all the content that's available through Informat. Okay, and we've had another question. I think this one's for Tom. Is it possible to search across multiple databases at the same time?
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, I'll share my screen to answer that one. So within ProQuest, you can search across multiple databases, which what I was doing. So you can see here there's the databases 21. So that's 21 ProQuest databases that we're searching across, and you can open that link to see what you're searching. But if I also go to the library catalog, so if you're looking for academic articles, you're also able to search across all of the academic articles that are available through the library's many databases, or the databases the library subscribes to. So when the library catalog loads, you'll be able to see across the top search bar, there's a drop-down menu on the right-hand side. And that, here we go, there it comes. So this menu here, usually it defaults to everything except articles. So that means it's searching everything within the library's collection except for articles that we subscribe through databases. So if you click the drop-down menu and click articles, then you're able to do a search. for across all of the databases that have those kind of articles included. So you'll be able to see a range of results here, and then you'll have the access online option. If you click on the catalog record, which will have the link to the resources, and it will say here, this is available through ProQuest Central. So that's one way to search across multiple databases. If you're looking for academic articles or similar articles, we also have a similar functionality for newspapers. So if we go back to the library catalogue, you can have a look at this news articles function. So that again will search across a range of databases, but looking at newspaper articles rather than academic journals. Hopefully that answers the question. I'll hand back to you, Marcus.
Thanks, Tom. And next question, I think for Caitlin, what's the best database for business research?
Oh, so I'll also just share my screen and we'll go back to the A to Z database page. So multi-subject databases can be really useful for business research because business research is often quite broad. But we do also have a specialized subject area here for business. So if we click on that and we go down a bit. So there is a ProQuest business database, which would also be indexed in the general ProQuest database. But here, IBIS World Australia is really great for Australian business reports, statistics, forecasts even. So that's a really good database to use, especially if you're doing Australian research. There's a lot of others that are listed here, many of them. So for instance, these top two are indexed within ProQuest Business. But yeah, those are really good databases for business research.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm just going to take back the share because I will answer the next question. So the next question coming through is the SLV ramping up digital access materials in any manner while it's closed beyond June? So we are always looking to expand the offering of digital databases and other online content that's available through the State Library. If you go into that A to Z databases list, you'll see that there is a very large selection of resources. As Caitlin pointed out, nearly 350 databases that are already available. And Caitlin also mentioned that we've got these trial databases available. So currently Haynes Manual is being trialed, and we will look to purchase that as a possible new database that's available as an ongoing material through the library. We also have Ancestry Library Edition available at home. Ordinarily, that database is only available to patrons that come into the library at Swanston Street, but because of the situation where the library is closed and people aren't able to access that resource, the vendor has generously allowed us to make that available to people from home during this COVID-19 lockdown period. And you'll see that we've also got here the ebook academic collection from EBSCO Host. So that's a collection of around 200,000 titles that we've currently got on trial through until the end of June. You can't currently access those through the catalogue. You need to actually click this link here, go into the database directly to access the titles that way. But we hope by the end of this week that we will have the titles in the catalogue, so you'll be able to find them through that. So yeah, we're constantly looking for new resources particularly that are relevant to the types of material we collect at the State Library. We'll make trials available where we can, and then we'll look to purchase those. There is always the budgetary concerns though, and oftentimes these are US-based databases, which means we're at the mercy of fluctuating currencies, but wherever possible, we do purchase new databases wherever they're relevant and they've got content that we think is going to be useful to our patrons. Okay, and then I think we've got time for a couple more quick questions. Another one for, let me see, where are we? So I think this one for Rebecca, I think. Can you please show me where to find old Irish newspapers? And that's come from Sheena in Mansfield.
Thanks, Sheena, for that question. We certainly do have one of our databases which covers Irish newspapers. And if you go back to this A to Z screen here, go into all subjects, and then if you navigate down to newspapers, which are newspapers historic, click on that. And then if you go down the list, you will see gradually, we'll get down here here we are, Irish Newspaper Archive. So that's another fantastic resource. If you click on that there, you will find that you can then do, first of all, it's going to ask you to log in. But once you've logged in with your new number, if you don't have one already, you will be able to search that database and find articles within the time period covered by it. Back to you, Marcus.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, a couple more questions quickly. This one I think for Tom. Can we keep articles that we download, and how does copyright work on those? You're still muted, Tom.
Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, so in terms of downloading the articles that you access through ProQuest and other databases, so the library's paid for the subscription to provide access, but that access is just for your own personal use. So if you're there's nothing, you're not allowed to republish any of the material that you've downloaded or profit from it in any way. So you can't use it apart from anything that's just for your personal research and personal use. And then, yeah, I think there is, if you go to the State Library website, we do have a page about copyright. Just put, we've got time to, if I can spell it correctly. And that will provide some general information about understanding copyright as well as it relates to our collection. So that's always a good thing to have a look at. But in general, yeah, just for personal use rather than for any business or profit. Back to you, Marcus.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. This one, what's the quickest way to see any new digital items in the SLB collection? Okay, so one thing that you can do, and I'll just take back screen sharing. If you're in the catalogue, when you do a search and you're logged in as a patron, I'll just do that quickly so that I can show you what I'm talking about. Up. So if you do any search in here, when you're logged in as a member, you'll have the option to save the search and then you can set an alert. Now, we actually went into greater detail about how that functionality works in a previous episode, so I won't go into the full detail now. But if you set an alert on a saved search, then every 7 days you'll get an email sent to you, and that will list any of the new material that's been added to the catalogue that matches the search that you ran. The other option that you can do is just keep an eye on the A to Z databases page in this new and trial databases tile here to see any of the new databases that are available for you to trial before they've actually been purchased by the State Library. Okay, 2 more questions. One, I think for Caitlin, are there specific databases that specialise in Indigenous resources?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm going to come back to the library page here. So a good place to start with Indigenous research is if you go to our Search and Discover page, then we'll go to our research guides page. So I mentioned research guides earlier. These are written by librarians at the State Library. And at the top here, we have quite a few research guides that are directly relevant to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And these are listed here. So depending on what aspect you're wanting to research, you might want to start with one of these guides. So I might start with the family history guide, so you can have a look at what that looks like. There'll be a range of different tabs here. So for instance, stolen generations. And there'll be a range of different resources mentioned here that may make your research easier. But also in the A to Z databases page, we have here a subject for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So we've got 8 databases that are relevant or that might be relevant. So the IATSIS collection is really strong. That's a really great website to have a look at. And then depending on your area of interest, you might want to look at the Indigenous Law Library. And also Blackwords down here is a really great database about storytelling cultures. Back to you, Marcus.
All right, thank you. And we've got one final question, so I'll just jump back into my screen. And it's just a follow-up from the previous question about the databases that we purchase and subscribe to, and how do we go about determining which databases to keep and to renew? Is that based on popularity of use or something else? So generally speaking, the State Library always tries to keep everything that comes into the collection. So if a physical item comes into the collection, that stays there forever. We never get rid of anything. Databases we try as much as possible to keep in the same vein, in that if we purchase a database or we subscribe to it, we will keep subscribing to it for as long as we possibly can. There are occasions, and it's very rare, but there are occasions where we do need to make decisions about databases, whether or not we can continue to keep them. And often that will come down to the amount of use that a particular database is getting. If a database has very limited use, or if it doesn't seem to have a lot of content that's relevant to what our patrons are searching for, then we may make the difficult decision not to continue with that database. But depending on how things go, we would always look at potentially resubscribing to that database down the track if we were able to. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions that we've had now. So thank you to everybody for taking the time to join in with us in this webinar. We have done a series of webinars now. So if you're interested in looking at any of the previous webinars in our online collection series, on the State Library homepage, if you just hover over this stories link here and click browse this section, that will take you through to all of the different content that's being produced by the State Library at the moment. So you'll see there's a whole range of different options that you can choose from. We've got some Ask a Librarian sessions, and the previous Our Online collections are also listed here. So feel free to have a look through all of those. And just to go back to what Tom and some of my colleagues were mentioning earlier, if you have any further questions about using any of our resources, then feel free to ask us using the Ask a Librarian service. If you scroll down to the very bottom of any of our web pages, you can click on this Ask a Librarian link. And as Rebecca pointed out, that will take you through to the option to link onto the online inquiry form. And from there, you can ask us any questions, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can with the answer. One final reminder is if you do want to access most of our subscription resources, you need to be a member and a Victorian resident. And you can just click on this Become a Member link at the top of the website and follow the steps to join. Okay, so we've covered off some basic information about databases today, what they are, how to find them, how to go about using them. As Tom mentioned, there are lots of different databases, but many of them operate in a very similar fashion to the ProQuest database that he showed you. So I encourage everybody to discover some of the databases, jump in there, have a bit of a look around, see what you can find. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Ask a Librarian service to ask your questions. And thank you.